Marcus and Lena had been backpacking through Italy for 2 weeks when they found the listing. It was late at night in a cheap hostel, the kind where you can hear strangers snoring through the walls, when Marcus stumbled across it on his phone. Charming basement apartment below historic chapel, private, affordable, authentic. The photos showed stone walls, a low arched ceiling, rustic furniture. It looked cozy, and it was cheap, much cheaper than anywhere else in the area. Lena laughed when he showed her. "It looks like a dungeon," she said. "But okay, romantic dungeon." They'd booked it for 3 nights. The village was beautiful in the way only very old places can be. Narrow cobblestone streets winding between centuries-old buildings, terracotta rooftops glowing orange under the late sun, a bell tower rising above it all like a sentinel. When they arrived, the owner, a tall, thin man with an odd stiffness to his movements, was waiting near the chapel steps. His eyes never quite settled on theirs. "The bells," he said in halting English. "They ring at midnight, do not be alarmed." He handed over the keys and walked away without another word. The apartment door was built right into the hillside beneath the chapel itself. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of stone and dust, as though the walls had been holding their breath for centuries. It was exactly like the photos, small, rustic, almost cozy if you ignored the way sound seemed to vanish into the corners. There were narrow windows high on the walls where the last of the daylight leaked through, and near the far side, half covered by a worn rug, was a patch of floor that looked slightly uneven. The first night passed quietly. They explored the village, had wine in the tiny square, and returned to the apartment just before midnight. When the bells rang, the sound rolled through the walls like distant thunder. The air seemed to tremble with it. Then silence returned, until Marcus frowned. "Do you hear that?" At first, Lena didn't. Then she caught it, a faint rhythmic sound beneath the floor. Low, muffled, like voices. Marcus tapped the floor with his foot. The sound didn't stop. It seemed to be coming from underneath them. "Probably pipes," he said. But his voice was tight, uncertain. The next day, they asked the woman at the cafe about it. She looked confused. "There are no pipes," she said. "Old crypts, maybe. Very old." That night, the voices returned. Clearer this time. Chanting. A low, steady rhythm that rose and fell like breath. Marcus found it then. A trap door in the corner, edges hidden beneath the rug. The wood was old, the lock older. Lena stepped back immediately. "Don't," she whispered. But Marcus knelt beside it, pressing his ear against the wood. The chanting vibrated through the floor into his bones. At midnight, the bells rang again. The voices below stopped instantly. The third night, Marcus woke to find Lena sitting up in bed, eyes wide. Something had knocked softly on the trapdoor. 3 times. When he crept closer, he saw the lock moving from the inside. The bells rang again, and the knocking stopped. The next morning, they tried to leave, but the gate at the edge of the village was chained shut. No one was outside. The cafe was dark. The owner was nowhere to be seen. That night, the chanting started earlier. Before the bells even rang, the voices were louder now. Feet scraped across stone beneath the floor. Hands pressed upward hard enough to bow the wood. When the bells rang at midnight, the lock on the trapdoor clicked open. The story ends with police arriving the next morning after locals reported screams. They found the apartment empty. The trapdoor stood open. Steps led down into darkness beneath the chapel. No one ever went down far enough to see where they ended. By the 3rd day of their road trip, exhaustion had replaced excitement. Emma drove while Josh navigated. Carly dozed in the back seat, and Nate stared blankly at the endless line of pine trees whipping past the windows. They had been following the same lonely highway for hours. No towns, no billboards, not even a gas station. So when the sign appeared out of nowhere, Silver Pines Luxury Resort, 5 miles. It felt like a gift. The sign was old-fashioned, the kind with elegant lettering and a painted arrow pointing down a narrow road. But the paint was fresh. The wood didn't look weathered at all. "Ever heard of it?" Josh asked, scrolling through his phone. No results. The resort wasn't on Google Maps. When he tried searching the name, the page refused to load. "Probably new," Nate said from the back seat. "Hidden gem or something." And after 3 nights of greasy diners and lumpy motel beds, the promise of luxury was too tempting to ignore. The road curved through the trees and opened suddenly into a clearing. The resort stood at the center like something out of a magazine. Tall timber walls, balconies overlooking a courtyard with a massive stone fountain, warm lights glowing in every window. It looked perfect, almost too perfect. But there were no cars in the lot, no people on the balconies, no sound except the faint splash of water in the fountain. The front doors stood open as if they had been expecting them. Inside, the lobby smelled of pine and faint perfume. A fire burned in the enormous stone fireplace. A woman at the desk looked up and smiled. It was the kind of smile that seemed practiced, like one she'd been wearing too long. "Welcome to Silver Pines," she said softly. "We've been waiting for you." The rooms were free. Dinner was free. Even the drinks in the bar were free. When they hesitated, the woman shook her head. "All we ask," she said, voice low but warm, "is that you stay the full 3 nights, to experience everything." The first night felt like a dream. The beds were soft. The food was better than anything they'd had in months. The staff moved silently through the dining hall, dressed in old-fashioned uniforms with brass buttons and polished shoes. They never spoke unless spoken to, and even then their smiles never faltered. "Where is everyone else?" Emma asked one waiter. The man paused before answering. "You will meet them soon," he said with a bow. That night, Emma thought she heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, measured. She opened the door to an empty corridor. But the footsteps continued, faint, like they were coming from inside the walls. On the second day, Josh found a small chapel near the edge of the property. The door was locked. A sign above it read, "Ceremony Hall, guests only." But when he pressed his ear to the wood, he swore he heard someone humming softly inside. That evening, their car wouldn't start. The hood was open. The wires were cut. No one admitted to seeing anything. The staff became watchful after that. Wherever the group went, someone was nearby, polishing railings, sweeping the courtyard, arranging flowers. Always close enough to see, never speaking. The third night, the woman at the front desk invited them to a special event. The dining hall had changed. The tables were gone. Chairs lined the walls in a wide circle, all facing the fountain in the center where the water now ran red under the lights. The staff stood behind the chairs, smiling too wide, waiting. When Nate tried to leave, 2 waiters stepped into the doorway. Silent, smiling. The story ends at dawn. The resort is silent again. The fountain runs clear. The rooms are empty. On the road outside, a new sign gleams with fresh paint. Silver Pines Luxury Resort, 5 miles. The Wilsons had been looking for somewhere quiet. A week away from traffic, work emails, ringing phones. Paul found the cabin online late one night. Rustic family retreat, lakeside views, secluded. It was cheap. Suspiciously cheap. But Marie was tired of the city, and the kids, Tyler and Sophie, had been begging to swim somewhere that wasn't a public pool. So they booked it. The road wound through pine trees for miles before the lake came into view. A sheet of silver water, perfectly still under a pale evening sky. The cabin sat alone on the near shore, dark wood glowing faintly in the last of the sunlight, its windows staring across the water like watchful eyes. By the time they unpacked, the sun had gone. leaving the lake black and glassy. Marie stood on the porch while Paul put the kids to bed. The air was cool. Too quiet. No birds, no wind. That's when she saw it. A faint light moving through the trees on the far side of the lake. It bobbed slowly between the trunks, too far to make out clearly. She told herself it was a lantern or a camper, but it disappeared before she could point it out to Paul. The next day was ordinary. Fishing, hiking. Tyler skipped rocks while Sophie collected shells. The family cooked dinner over the fire pit and went to bed early. That night, Marie saw the light again. 2 of them this time, moving through the same patch of trees, closer to the water now. She mentioned it to Paul, who frowned. Probably fishermen, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The third night, Paul woke to the sound of water, not waves. Something moving in the lake. He went to the window. The lights were at the shoreline now on the far side. 2, 3, maybe more. Marie came up behind him silent. The lights swayed like they were being carried. Then they stepped into the water. Slowly, deliberately, crossing. Paul locked the doors after that. The kids weren't allowed outside after dark. They kept the curtains shut. But the next night, the lights reached their side of the lake. He thought he saw figures behind them. Tall, thin, moving strangely, like their limbs bent wrong. That night, something knocked on the door, softly, 3 times. Paul grabbed the fire poker, yanked the door open. The porch was empty, but wet footprints glistened on the boards, leading into the house. The next morning, Sophie was gone. Her bed empty, front door unlocked. No sound except the wind rippling faintly through the trees. They searched the shoreline, the woods. Nothing. That night, only one light appeared on the water, moving slowly back toward the far shore. By the time police arrived 2 days later, the cabin was empty. The lake was calm, but locals say that on foggy nights, more lights appear, crossing slowly toward the cabins along the shore. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.